character arcs are incredibly important in writing. And I think that the show Amphibia does an amazing job of illustrating some really well thought out and pretty intense at times character arcs. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 of them. Our main character Anne, her best friend Sasha, and the villain King Andrias. They all have amazing character arcs, so let's get right to it. Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking all about Amphibia, which I recently watched and was blown away by the character arcs, so I figured I'd do a video all about them. Now, I did talk a little bit about this in my... Okay, I'm gonna get ready for a really long name. What writers can learn from The Owl House, Gravity Falls, Amphibia, and Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I talked a bit about this in that video, but I'm going to be doing a much more in-depth deep dive in this one, so whether you've seen that video or not, you can watch this one and learn from it. Let's get right to it and start with Anne Boonchuy. When we first meet Anne, I actually didn't really like her. But as the story goes on, I realized that's because she had so much growing to do as a character. And not just in a, we didn't know how to write this character in the beginning, but it got better as the show went on. But in an intentional character arc, character evolution sort of way. For example, Anne, when we first meet her, is very flawed and selfish because she doesn't really know what friendship is. So when she befriends Sprig, who I love and need to cosplay as anyway, when she befriends Sprig, we see her trying to sort of push her own ideas of what friendship is onto him, saying that friendship is about doing what the other person wants, otherwise you'll get left behind. This is a character flaw of hers. And then we get to watch her grow past this. However, realistically, it's not easy for Anne. And that's what I love about the character arcs in this show. Very often in stories, we see a protagonist start out perfect and end perfecter. That is not what this show is like at all. The characters start out flawed and they end slightly less flawed. And that's great. That's what character arcs are supposed to be like. A character starts with a flaw, we get to slowly watch them overcome it, and then they don't have it anymore, but there's still the signs of it, and they're still maybe fighting against it. For example, with Anne, the selfishness, the sort of pushiness, but also the fact that she's a little bit of a pushover make an interesting character. Because yes, she is selfish and pushes her own agenda, but she can also be pushed around very easily by others. And it seems like those traits are more of a learned thing and a lack of maturity than an actual integral part of herself. So throughout the series, as she's surrounded by new characters like the Planter family, we get to see her overcome these obstacles, grow and mature as not only a person but a character. Her evolution is like a roller coaster, and I really enjoyed that. We don't get to see her have a clear straight line up. We get to watch her try to be better, fail, try to be better, fail, try to be better, fail. But each time that she tries, she gets a little bit higher until eventually she's at that same point that we always knew she was going to achieve. But it's not a straight line, it's a wiggly one. And that's really interesting. That's really compelling, and that shows good execution on the writers and creators' part. What makes her a great character is not how quickly she can get over her problems. It's that no matter how hard it is, she doesn't give up. This brings me to example B, Sasha. Sasha Waybright is such an interesting character. I could talk about her for hours. She was probably my favorite to watch evolve over the course of the series, just because it felt like such an example of what a redemption arc should be like. Now, why it's such an amazing character arc is because of one simple thing. She resists it. I'm gonna start quoting my notes now. Sasha believes that she needs to be in control, and this translates into her being a bully so that everything always goes her way. But when Anne finally matures enough to stand up to her, she's faced with the choice of either losing her friend or admitting that she's in the wrong. Realistically, she chooses denial. She then slides ever deeper into her controlling ways, until finally she reunites with Anne and pretends to have changed to get what she wants. But even pretending is clearly a struggle for her. I'll get back to my quoting after I talk about what this means a little bit. Sasha is a controlling bully. We see signs of this in every flashback, and then when we finally meet her in Amphibia, we see even more signs of this. While she's initially introduced to us as this best friend of Anne's who we assume must be some angel, we quickly realize she is not. She is a villain. Which is why she makes such a great villain. Not only does Anne initially think she's perfect and want to do what she says, when Anne pushes back, Sasha actively bullies her and tries to stop her. and Anne has to show her character arc and evolution and stand up to her friend. After season 1, when they have their showdown, we get to see Sasha in season 2 backsliding even more. It's not like being faced with her friend's accusations of her being a bully makes Sasha want to change. They make her angry, they make her deny that she's like that, and sink into her own problems even more. No one ever wants to admit that they're wrong, so instead, they'll just say the other person is. This is called being a human. And Amphibia, even though it's a show about anthropomorphic frogs, really captures humanity. It's not until Anne confronts Sasha again that it is revealed that she hasn't changed and is only doing this for her own gain and her own control. When I say this, I mean pretending to have changed. In one of these seasons, we get this amazing arc where Sasha and Grimes, I love Sasha and Grimes. Grimes is amazing, but for now we're just focusing on Sasha. Sasha and Grimes join the protagonists, and Sasha pretends to have changed. She stops being controlling, she stops being manipulative, she stops being a bully. She's this perfect little angel. And instantly I was like, what is happening? Did they decide to totally forget her character arc? Initially I was annoyed at the creators because I was like, what happened to this character? She was on such an interesting path. But as the series continues, we realize she's faking. And I forgave the creators and then maybe applauded them a lot because it was really interesting to see this. Sasha will not admit that she's wrong. However, she will admit that she's doing something that her friends are picking up on. So there's the first bit of acknowledging that she's doing something wrong, but not enough to actually make her change. So instead, she just pretends to. But when Anne figures her out, she says something that made me love this show so much. She says that she doesn't want to change, that she's happy with who she is. And this is where the Frog Show captures humanity so well. People don't want to change. So this is realistic, and it shows a greater evolution. She is still stuck in her old ways, and she doesn't have any intention of changing them. She is still in denial. However, once she loses her friends, she realizes that she is partly to blame, and when given the choice between staying in her old ways, staying in her comfort zone, Sasha decides to fight against it. Is it easy? No, but that's what makes it a character arc. The first step to changing is admitting to herself that she was wrong, and this is hard, but necessary. A character arc is not about climbing a straight path. It is not about going from being perfect to being perfecter, or from being flawed to being flawless. It is about trying to face the thing inside yourself that is holding you back. It is about struggling against this thing and eventually, slowly, climbing your way up that mountain until you've beat it. It is about the roller coaster. If Sasha realized she was being a bully and stopped being a bully, there would be no character arc. There would just be two different characters. But because we get to see Sasha slowly realizing that she's being a bully, but not really admitting it to herself, and so backsliding by pretending to have changed, admitting she doesn't have any intention to change, and then eventually realizing that she has to, and slowly climbing that path until she can actually change, that's what makes her character arc so interesting, so realistic, and so compelling. If she went from being flawed to flawless, I wouldn't care about her at all. I didn't automatically love Sasha. I automatically didn't like Sasha. But it's seeing the human progression of her facing her own demons that makes it so interesting. We want that moment where the character is in denial and says, I don't want to change. I'm fine the way I am. We don't want a character who just goes, oh, you're right, I'm bad. I'll just throw that trait that's been with me my whole life out the window. No biggie. That doesn't happen in real life. So why should it happen in a story? And that brings me to King Andrias. I actually didn't really care about King Andrias in the beginning either. If you're noticing a theme, I didn't care about any of these characters when I first met them. And then as time went on, I realized how complex and well thought out they were. So let's get quoting. King Andrias is a perfect example of backstory making characters more complex. We're first introduced to him as a benevolent and kind ruler. But as the story progresses, we realize that this is just a front. Or is it? This is what makes his character so compelling. He is both a benevolent and kind ruler and a tyrannical overlord at the same time. And it's really interesting to get to watch his progression throughout the show and discover how he can be two different people at once. King Andrias was raised at a time when the Newts were infamous conquerors and was shaped from a very young age to be a villain. His father taught him to be cunning and not to trust anyone. So when one of his best friends turned against him in hopes of stopping the Newts' destruction of the other worlds, it was easy for Andrias to lean into his father's words and blame her instead of himself. Without his friends to guide him in the right direction anymore, Andrias begins to follow the path that his father had initially set out for him. Andrias is an interesting character because we see him actively fighting against the villainous words of his father in the beginning of his story. Not the beginning of the show story, but the beginning of his character arc. When we learn his backstory, we see that he was friends with a toad and a frog, completely denying the current caste system that's in place. And then we see him trying to make excuses for the bad things that are happening. What's so interesting about this is because he is clearly initially in his story set up to be a character, set up to be a villain who will become a hero. But because of the actions of his friend Leaf, when she betrays him, takes the music box, and runs, he sinks into the villainy that he was pushing actively against. This allows for two things to be true at once. He is both a benevolent and kind ruler, a goofy and friendly character who we want to love, and a tyrannical overlord set on the destruction of Earth and many other worlds. And this confusing two mirror versions of himself are very compelling, because it gives him layers. If you want to hear me talk a little bit more about how characters are basically onions, you should check out my What Writers Can Learn from She-Ra and the Princess of Power video, where I talk all about villains. And if you're interested in King Andrias' arc, you might like that video too, because villains. So, you know, I'll link it up above. So now, in the bit of his story, we are at the point where King Andrias has fallen into villainy, created a caste system, cast away his friends, and is ruling as a kind and benevolent ruler, secretly scheming the end of the multiverse. So when Marcy arrives and offers another chance at friendship and redemption, it's interesting to see the complexities of their relationship. Andrias needs to use Marcy for his own goals, but he also does care for her. In the end, though, his father's words win out, and Andrias betrays Marcy as he had initially planned. The key here, though, is that he regrets it. Through this, we see the first step in his character arc, remorse. Andrias wants to change, but feels that he can't. People will always find excuses. Andrias clearly does not believe in the cause that his father told him of all those years ago, but he does feel responsible for the way that the Newt kingdom has crumbled because he let his friend steal the music box. He feels betrayed by his friend and like his father was right. But then we see that he does not like being this person. He feels regret and remorse, but he also feels like he has no other choice. He can both throw Sprig off of a building, which, like, I started crying when he did that, so no thank you, Andrias. And also burst into tears when a letter from his friend is revealed and that it's shown him that she does still care about him. He is a complex character with layers and layers and layers. And the way that this works is by giving him regrets. Villains can do terrible things even if they regret them afterwards. A character arc is not about, as I keep saying, going from perfect to perfecter. It's about going from flawed to slightly less flawed. It's about facing the problems within yourself and coming out on top. Or it's about facing the problems within yourself and losing. With King Andrias, he lives long enough to do both. His core problem is that he believes he has to do all of these terrible things because they're not really terrible, they're just what he's supposed to do. If he doesn't do them, if he doesn't conquer the multiverse, then he failed. We get to see him both fight against this and lose when he decides to start up the, I don't know, multiverse grinder once again, and also fight against this and win when he realizes that this is not what he wants. This is what his father wants, and his father should not have control over him. Finally, when Andrias truly begins to make amends is when he discovers that Leaf, the one who betrayed him, still cared about him. This opened the floodgates for all his regrets, because in her letter she tells him to keep his heart open, and he realizes that he had done the opposite. The second step in his character arc is admitting that he was wrong, and that he is guilty of doing terrible things. Finally, in the finale, he is faced with a decision. Choose the most beneficial and easy path, helping his father, or the hard path that would leave him powerless. Standing up to him. Standing up to the person who made him this way, and taking action on the change he's always wanted to make, he makes the final step in his character arc. While he doesn't seem to think of himself as redeemed, the others do, and this is how his character arc is shown to the world. His change within himself made an impact on the world and those around him. Character arcs can influence your plot. They can influence the other characters. Character arcs are the roller coaster of trying to face something within yourself, of losing and winning and losing and repeating this process until eventually you're in a position where you win more than you lose. A character arc is about a slow evolution, and it is about the times that you mess up just as much as the times that you succeed. So if you want to continue learning about this sort of stuff, check out my How to Write Protagonists video and whatever this other one on the screen is, because I don't know what it is. It's just whatever my most recent video is. I could guess, but like, I don't know when you're watching this. For all I know, you're watching this and I'm like 50. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? Okay, well, I'll see you on the next page. Oh wait, subscribe, please. Thank you. Okay, bye.